In today's video, we have the latest news from around the NHL. We have the latest UFA rumors, a few players that are still unsigned have been linked to a few teams, plus we have some trade talk around teams like Montreal, Vancouver, and Washington. We'll get into the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We're having a very rainy day here in Digby, Nova Scotia, so you can see the nice view of the Bay of Fundy behind me, but nothing going to be done outdoors today. It's a rainy day with thunderstorms and not looking like a promising day for vacation, but here we are nonetheless. So in the news cycle of the NHL, we don't have any new signings today, but there are some players that are looking for work that are still undecided where they're heading, looking that have been linked to a few new teams, including goaltender Jerard Halak, who was the backup last year with the New York Rangers. I've seen reports that he's not real crazy about going to a team with the possibility of being a number 3, like a third string goalie. He still feels like he's played well enough to be, at the very least, the number 2, which I think we could probably agree with that he can be. The only thing is that there's not a lot of opportunities around the league, but there is a team that is looking, and that would be former Stanley Cup champion back-to-back Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, as I mentioned before in other videos, I wondered if the Lightning might try to find a way to add another experienced goaltender. He would certainly fit the bill. Right now, Vasilevsky obviously is the starter. There's no doubt about that. But their number 2 right now, based on their depth chart, is Jonas Johansson. And he's proven to be very inconsistent in his limited amount of NHL experience. He's more inclined to be a number 3, where he can be your third stringer if one of your top 2 guys gets hurt, maybe play in the American League, etc. So I would think at this point that's how things are trending. No guarantee that Halak gets signed and goes to Tampa, but there is some links suggesting the teams there are talking, and it might go that way. Another UFA rumor floating around based on a recent interview is the Penguins may be intrigued in possibly signing UFA forward Rumours Tatar. Now, Tatar, like I said, recently completed an interview. It is in a native Czech Republic, so it's not perfectly in English. It was translated through Google, so it's not, everything's not exactly perfectly word for word, but essentially the gist of it is that he did indicate that there were some conversations with the Penguins. Plus, we had seen other reports from Penguins beat writer Rob Rossi of The Athletic not long ago suggest that the Penguins had a keen interest in this player. Of course, after pulling off the huge trade with their Erik Karlsson, as much as they got their guy and certainly, revitalized the offense in the back end with him being brought in, they did lose a lot of players in the process, which was necessary for cap purposes. I mean, they brought in Karlsson and actually came ahead cap-wise, which we wouldn't have thought was going to be possible. At the very least, it would maybe be a break-even situation, but they were able to shed Jeff Petrie with a little bit of salary retained. They were able to shed the contract of Mikael Granlund. They traded Casey DeSmith. And all in all, with the little bit of money that the Sharks retained on Karlsson, they actually came ahead in the situation. Now, they still don't have, a lot of wiggle room cap-wise. They're still pretty tight, and they could obviously finagle some things around. If they sign a guy like Tatar, it would have to be cheap. And, we'll see what he'll agree to if he will. But ultimately, Tatar could be a great addition to their third line, could give them a lot better play than Granlund did, and possibly for a lot less money. I mean, Tatar at this point is concerned that he may have to go to a training camp on a PTO. I would be very confident he'd get signed if he had to do that. If anything, it would just give teams, whoever he goes to, whether it be Pittsburgh or otherwise, more time to figure things out, maybe move a contract or put somebody through waivers or whatever to kind of clear a roster spot and some space. So we'll have to see what happens. But right now there is interest on both sides there. Tatar in his interview didn't really want to elaborate more than there were some conversations. It kind of sounded like he had conversations with other teams before and just, was concerned that if you talk too much, basically, that it was going to, cause things to not happen, which, you certainly want to be cautious of, especially in today's market. But ultimately, those are a couple of players we could see. And with those two teams, now another player who was a pending UFA and a signed, Daniel Sprong, who had a bit of a breakout year last year, finally discovered his goal-scoring ability at the NHL level with the Kraken and hit 20 goals last year, ended up signing a UFA contract in Detroit. Daniel Sprong has actually been accused of some things and is now facing some potential charges. Apparently, Sprong has been charged, accused of assault against an IndyCar driver. He's accused of assaulting Zachary Clayman DeMello, and apparently this has reportedly taken place at IndyCar's Grand Prix event in Detroit recently. So I don't know what will come from this. At this point, they're just accusations. We know, obviously, players are formally charged or anything, it can certainly impact their contracts and their careers. So I don't know. I haven't seen any comments at this point from the Red Wings on the situation or from Sprong. So I don't know what will come from this, if anything, but it might be something worth keeping an eye on here. Of course, the other thing that when we hear players facing charges, we think of the potential, the outcome of the 2018 World Junior Championship situation with Team Canada. That's been under investigation for over a year now. I know there's been no announcements yet. I know back a couple weeks ago we had a report from Andy Strickland saying that he had heard, and he heard names, not only that there was a number, but names too, the 5 players that were likely going to be facing significant suspensions. And he said some of the names were, not exactly no names around the NHL. There was a couple of them that at least that were, reasonably prominent players with their teams. So we never did get anything further on that as of yet. I know there was an update from Bill Daly. He was asked by a reporter when, is it reasonable that we could have something soon or before training camps open? And all he would say was that he did not have a definitive timeline or time frame when the outcome of the investigations and everything would be announced. So there's lots of speculation. I've seen some various different reporters and a couple podcasts comment on this here in the past week, and essentially it sounds like it's kind of a legal thing that's being held up. Like I mentioned before, I do wonder if they're waiting on police, if charges are going to be laid, because if the police, for example, says that they're not going to press charges, then I don't see how the NHL can suspend. It makes it tough, right? So I think they're between the NHL, the NHLPA, the London police, any lawyers that are representing any players involved. There's probably a lot of back and forth and trying to figure all this out. So I don't know when we're going to get this figured out and find out what the conclusion of the investigation was. What do they feel happened? What are players facing suspensions, and if so, what are they? I would imagine as an NHL team, they'd probably want to know this before training camp, so that if one of their players is going to be facing a major discipline, that they would be aware of it, so they could plan ahead accordingly. But they may not. There could be some players, and obviously the players, I'm sure, know at this point their potential implications, but teams may not, and they may not have a lot of time to react to the news. So it's just, I guess the unfortunate part here from a business perspective, but at the end of the day, the main thing we want to see is the victim obviously get their justice. That's the primary thing. And if any players are guilty, which it sounds like they could be, then we want to see some discipline take place. But again, like I said, from a legal standpoint, that might be extremely challenging. Now, as I mentioned as well, we want to look at a few trade scenarios around the NHL. One that's kind of a spin-off effect. We got some news out of Vancouver, which could affect potential deals there, because they do have a bit of a cap situation, especially after signing Pius Suter. We don't know if they're going to need to be clearing space or not, because there's a couple of players there on LTIR. Like last year, they had Mikheyev, Pullman, and Tanner Pearson all on LTIR. Mikheyev appears good to go. We've had that confirmation that he'll be ready for camp. But Pearson and Pullman, we get, there's some question marks. But right now, we did get an update from Rick Dollywall, Vancouver media. On Tucker Pullman, it's very unlikely he's going to be ready to go. As of right now, he has not been cleared to play. So most likely, unless there's some real positive developments in the next few weeks, which, considering how long it's been, it seems like the odds are certainly against that from happening, that he would start the year on LTIR. So at this point, he also said and confirmed that Tucker Pullman does not want to retire or say that, I'm done, I can't play anymore. He is still hopeful and optimistic to try and make a comeback. So we'll hope for his sake that he can do that, but it doesn't look like promising at all that it's going to happen for at least the start of the year. Could it happen later into the season? I guess it's always possible, but we don't know. I mean, he could go to training camp to go through an evaluation, and they may determine that it's best for him to sit out the whole year. I don't know. But at this point, he won't start the season on the main roster. That much we can say for certain. I know with Tanner Pearson, there's at least some optimism, but if Pearson is able to play, if he can be cleared medically and they decide that he's, able to play and makes the team, then that's going to create a cap problem. If they can use his contract as LTIR, if he's not able to go because he's been having issues with that hand injury for an extended period of time, then at that point, they would be able to be compliant with what they have. They wouldn't be forced to make a move, but if he's able to play and is cleared, then they're going to need to move out about $2 million or so in space, which we know they want to do anyway. Like I said, there's been a long time here that they've been linked to wanting to clear out some of the forwards. We've heard lots of names out there, and nothing has really come to be as of yet. So what it's going to end up being, it's hard to say. I don't see Miller or Besser getting moved before camp or early in the season. I don't think that's a possibility. Besser is making too much money and hasn't really proved that that he can justify the contract at this point. So I think that's unlikely. And Miller, of course, his new contract and trade protection just kicked in, which makes that very unlikely. Obviously, some guys like Pettersson and Kuzmenko, we know they're not going anywhere. They obviously would prefer not to trade any of their younger players too, like a Podkolzin or Hoglander. So you're looking at maybe a Garland. Will Beauvillier end up staying after they acquired him from the Islanders? That's another question mark too. So we'll see. But depending on the health of Tanner Pearson will determine if they need to or if it's more of a preference. But they do have more than enough forwards, and at the very least, if they don't trade anybody, they're going to have to end up placing a couple of guys with NHL contracts on waivers, which they could lose for nothing if they can't find trades, of course. Frank Saravalli is reporting out of Washington that the Capitals are still very much looking to make some trades. So, of course, these are players that have been in the rumor mill for a long time. So no real big shocking news here, but certainly they're very, very interested in still trying to move Anthony Mantha. He said the Capitals understand and realize that odds are certainly against them. There's been, next to no interest around the league, partially, I think, because of his contract. If they had to bottom out, I'm sure he probably could have got signed somewhere for a cheap deal, but that never came to be. They didn't want to have the dead money long term, or at least beyond the current season at the very least. But if they do retain some money, I think that there's maybe some hope, but they may even place them on waivers and try to bury it in minors if need be. They won't get full cap relief, but at least they have the option to place him in the minors. He doesn't necessarily even have to play there, but they can put him on the minor league roster, and they can get $1.1 million thereabouts in cap relief, which could help. So we'll see how camp goes for Mantha, but still very much in the mix for a trade. And, of course, they're still very interested in shaking up their top six and trading Evgeny Kuznetsov as well. But, again, he comes with multiple years on his deal with a little bit more hefty of a price tag. And that's going to be more challenging to do. They've attempted to do this for some time and has yet to figure anything out. So I would think if and when a trade ever comes to be, that they probably want another center back. That's why we've talked about the possibilities before with another team looking to move a center like a Scheifele or something in Winnipeg. Maybe that would be a fit. But at this point, we don't have any reason to think or know for sure that those two teams have had extensive conversations. Now, Montreal, I want to discuss the Habs goaltending situation. We know that there's a good chance, a very good chance, in fact, that a goalie does get moved. Montreal goalie Samuel Montembeault recently conducted an interview where he had some interesting comments, which kind of fueled speculation a little bit further that it's certainly not going to be him. I know he was asked about his reaction to the Karlsson trade and finding out that even though Erik Karlsson was the big main piece being moved, that Montreal got involved and not only did that, but acquired players, including goaltender Casey DeSmith. He said he was quite surprised, knowing that obviously he and Jake Allen were the tandem last year. They have Caden Primo in the mix, so didn't really expect of all things they could do and be involved in that a goaltender would be, maybe coming to the organization. But apparently he was told that Kent Hughes, the GM of the Habs, immediately after making the trade called his Montembeault's agent and assured him that Samuel Montembeault has nothing to worry about. They're still very pleased with how he played last year, and at this point would be probably the projected starter. I think it's fair to say between him and Jake Allen last year, I think Montembeault they played pretty well 50-50 or close to it, but I think Jake had a bit of a down year, and really for overall the team didn't play well, but it just seemed like they did play a little bit better when Montembeault was between the pipes. So I don't know. Obviously, training camp will determine a lot in preseason play. They could end up splitting 50-50 again, but certainly if Montembeault's not going anywhere by the sounds of things, then either DeSmith or Allen would be, or Primo, of course. But, of course, it doesn't make sense really to move him just yet. I think he's still kind of looked upon as being a potential good fit for the future. He's no longer waivers exempt, though. So if he's going to play in the minors, he'll need to clear waivers, which if you have 4 goalies, you're not going to carry 4. At least one's going through waivers. Carrying 3 is a possibility. Thankfully, they do have the big LTIR pool because of the Carey Price contract, which they could use. Not really ideal, but if they carry 3 goalies, like I said, it's not great for all of them. If they split the time between the 3, then none of them are going to be playing a lot. At the same time, if they sit one out an extended time, that's not good for him either, and that probably wouldn't be DeSmith, because why have Casey DeSmith be on your roster and just sit out and not be a regular player, because then you're not going to be able to showcase them and really have a chance to move them. So it's difficult to say, but it does sound like one of the more veteran goaltenders is more likely to get moved. Of course, Casey DeSmith doesn't have trade protection in his contract. Jake does. He was just signed to an extension there last year by the Habs, so I would think Casey DeSmith is a much more likely guy to get flipped here. Same goes for Jeff Petrie, which we've talked about before. So I don't think Montreal had intention of trading for Petrie and DeSmith and keeping either of them. This interview with Samuel Montembeault just kind of solidifies the fact that it's not going to be him going anywhere, which isn't a huge surprise, but this kind of confirms for us that one of the veteran guys like DeSmith will likely be on the move. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and trade talk down in the comment section. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.